Blog Talk Radio.
Are you ready to take a bite out of the competition? Are you looking for ideas to make your business better? Welcome to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet,
sponsored by Apple Capital Group.
At the core of every successful business, you'll find people making a difference. And with each episode of the Core Business Show, we talk with those people, examine those ideas, and explore the strategies that make them special. Now, the host of the Core Business Show, Tim Jacquet.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Core Business Show. I'm Tim Jacquet, your host. Today I have the pleasure of having John Phillips. He's an attorney out of Jacksonville, well known in Florida, and also seen on today's show. Today we're going to talk about the truth about Trayvon and George Zimmerman. If you have any questions, please give us a call at 347-324-3460, or you can pose a question in the chat room. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Great to be on.
I guess the biggest thing is, kind of bring us up to date about the case of your mind, but to begin with, kind of tell us about yourself, and maybe we can go from there.
Sure. I'm a criminal and civil defense attorney in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where the special prosecutor's from in this case. And I've practiced for about 12 years now, licensed in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and have a fairly large presence on social media through Know the Lawyer and KnowTheLawyer.com.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for coming on the program. I guess if you can bring us up to date, if you don't mind, about the facts about this particular case, and I guess where you think it's going to be headed.
Sure. It all starts, and I wrote a blog. It's on TrayvonBlog.com. There's been, because of the racial issues and the way the media took the case, it's one that people are passionate about on both sides. It's not like Casey Anthony, that everybody was against Casey Anthony. George Zimmerman has his side and his supporters, but most of the country seems to be more in the Trayvon Martin camp. And it's impossible not to be sympathetic to the family who lost their 17-year-old child.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, George Zimmerman was having some issues with his neighborhood. It had been vastly affected by the foreclosure market, and they'd had a low occupancy rate, and so there was a criminal element moving in, and people had lots stolen, and in the 260 unit complex, the police had been called 402 times over about a 2-year period. So that's a serious problem.
Mm-hmm.
And Zimmerman was the essentially self-proclaimed and elected neighborhood watchman. And, he saw, everybody knows the rest. He saw Trayvon, an African-American youth with a hoodie acting in his mind suspiciously. He had reports as the neighborhood watchman of an African-American youth with a hoodie in the past that may have been guilty of some of the thefts. And so he essentially took it upon himself as the neighborhood watchman to become the neighborhood chaseman, went after Trayvon, and in an altercation in which nobody really knows what happened, Trayvon was killed. So, that part, and the Sanford police didn't really react soon enough, according to public opinion. And sometimes it takes a while before you charge someone with a murder charge, just because they've got to have probable cause, and the probable cause here is kind of tied up in what people have cited as stand your ground law, your ability to defend yourself, although I don't think it's applicable here. And what really happened in the altercation was did George Zimmerman have a threat on his life such that it was appropriate to take another's life in defense? And that's the issue. And Zimmerman was finally charged and released this week on bond, $150,000 last week, $150,000 bond, and so he's somewhere in the state of Florida waiting the discovery process and trial.
Going back a moment regarding that altercation and using deadly force, and nobody would know what the facts are in that particular situation. However, is it, even if you're a licensed gun holder, if the other person is unarmed, can you use deadly force?
You can only use deadly force essentially when deadly force or something interpreted as deadly force is coming at you. And that's the problem with Zimmerman's defense is, even if, and we, they've released photos of his bloody head. Even if he had the gun properly as a concealed weapon on his side, and the story that his side's going to put out essentially to be able to defend this is an altercation ensued. Trayvon came after him, and that he was punched or hit his head tackled, had his head hit against the sidewalk, and the gun came loose. And at the point the gun comes loose, it's like a movie where you got a villain and a good guy struggling for it, and whoever gets to it first is going to be the victor. And that is that's probably how the facts are going to come out at trial, for him to be able to say that he was facing death himself. But granted, again, when you go from neighborhood watchman, somebody watching and reporting, to neighborhood chaseman, and trying to be the police officer for the neighborhood when the police are coming and they say you don't need to chase him down, that's where either way he put himself into this bad situation.
Yeah, then you got recorded. Now, of course, if people struggling, I'm sure that what they're going to say, he's struggling for the gun. However, and I'm sure he had a permit for it, but how can he get a fair trial? I mean, Anthony Casey's situation was one particular thing, but this one, when you have all of this emotion tied to it, I can't see how in the world this guy's going to get a fair trial in Florida. I mean, maybe if he goes to remote, Nebraska, Montana, yeah. But to be fair, I just can't see any jury is going to go in his favor. I mean, something's going to happen, but however, can a person get a fair trial with all of this emotion tied to it? I mean, probably
it's going to be tough. And the difference with Casey Anthony's situation is I don't think I heard one opinion on Casey Anthony's side. And George Zimmerman has his proponents. He's got more opponents, but he's got people that kind of understand the mentality of, I can't take it anymore. I'm tired of being the victim and, then getting caught up in something over his head. But you don't, if you're going to be the zealous neighborhood watchman, leave the gun in the glove compartment. That's where he went wrong. You're not going to get a fair trial anywhere near Sanford or Orlando or Central Florida, probably even Tampa, just because they know about that Sanford Police Department. The new Black Panthers and all have kind of marked their territory there with bounties and everything else. But the problem is nationally, so has Barack Obama, so has sports stars. Everybody's weighed in on this to the tune of our president saying that could have been his son. And so it's definitely tainted the jury pool. But if you get out to South Florida or the Panhandle, I think you can find 12 people that would essentially, you're going to have to pick from a few hundred. It's going to take a while, but you could find, a few people that say, look, I don't know what happened, and I will do my best to put all the prejudices and all the media reports out of my head and listen and just judge on what's happened in this courtroom, over the course of trial.
Okay. When it comes to time in any world, in business world or even in law, time does heal. You think in the sense of them dragging this out probably like a year until things calm down, or 2 years, is that possible with this particular case for him to get a fair trial?
Yeah, provided the Jesse Jacksons and all of, what the background thing that happened here, and I deal with the media all the time, so I have my own show, so I kind of, understand it, is this was and still is a slow news period. There's nothing else really going on. Now we finally have the Obama, Secret Service scandal, with Columbia. But other than that, there's really been no other national story that has been able to take the limelight off of this one since February. So we've been 3 months into it, and over the course of time, it's going to dissipate some. It's going to lose its fervor, especially as you see bloody photos of Zimmerman and the media. I mean, because the problem is the media, when it first came out, showed a picture of Zimmerman in his prison mugshot, whatever from several years ago, and they showed Trayvon, 5 years earlier as like 14 looking angelic. And so they started the sensationalism, and it's dissipated already some. And I think, like you said, time will kind of help unbias out certain people. And people are already tired of hearing about it. Every time I post I'm going to do one of these interviews, people are like, really? But it's, on the same token, it's that train wreck that people still want to look and hear and see what's going on with, because it is such a compelling story.
Sure. Do you think the authorities in Stanford acted fair in this case? I know you had to do your probable cause and be fair. Hey, let's see what the facts of the story. Do you think they acted appropriately in this, or they kind of dropped the ball, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, based upon reviewing Zimmerman's side and the fact that he was so familiar with the Stanford Police Department from calling them repeatedly, it was almost like he was an extension of their arm in their mind.
Okay.
And they were aware to some extent of him out there, trying to clean up his neighborhood just off of the myriad, just gross myriad of 911 calls he made. So, I think they did give him preferential treatment when you have when you had a murdered youth. They brought him in and let him out, and he should have been charged. And then, for the stand your ground stuff to even come out and then say they don't find probable cause based upon a law that's really inapplicable, they totally dropped the ball. And for it to take bringing in a special prosecutor, the DA here, state attorney here from Jacksonville, to go all the way down to Central Florida to make sure the charges are brought, that's the problem. And clearly, whether it's because his dad was a magistrate in Virginia, or because of their familiarity with him, or because of racial issues, whatever it was, it took too long to bring him to justice in some way.
Okay. Tell us about it regarding Stanford Police Department. Stanford is a small community, a city outside of Orlando. What's sensationalized Stanford? Do they have any other type of problems, and that's what elevated this into a different issue altogether?
Yeah, it's Sanford, SAMFORD.
Okay.
And it's Orlando, the suburbs of Orlando. It depends on which way you go.
Okay.
There's a lot of affluence. There's some wealth there. Sanford has some of that, but it's also got neighborhoods like this that townhomes that have been hit pretty hard. So you've got both. And we do in most situations. You've got both elements, but in prior issues, there was critique on the Stanford Police Department with racial profiling and preferential treatment. But again, that's something unfortunately all across the country. But Stanford was known amongst locals as having some degree of bias against the African American, or some profiling of an African American.
Okay. Taking into account of his security and his bond itself, $150,000. Which is not on the low end or high end, kind of match what the risk is. But however, do you think out of his own personal safety, I know a lot of people don't like him. I can't see how he can hold a job because of some people be for him, some people are going to be against him. Do you think he really is fearing his safety, or he just using that in order to get special treatment?
Well, and the judge, his bond conditions are fairly extreme. The amount is one thing, but he can't drink alcohol. He can't obviously have a firearm. He can't. He has a curfew of sundown to sun up. I think 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. He has to be on lockdown. He's got a GPS bracelet attached to him. He has to check in at least every 3 days, although the bracelet monitors constantly. So part of it, I think, is to protect him from others and make sure he's safe. But in Zimmerman's mind, he's going to get off of this. He didn't do anything wrong. I kind of said he'd probably be safer in jail when when this was all going down. But in his mind and in his attorney O'Mara's mind, he's going to be acquitted because to a reasonable degree. To beyond a reasonable doubt, you have so many facts that are in confusion that I don't think you're going to be able to prove that this was murder too. So that it's. He's essentially, if he goes to Chili's, or if he goes, anywhere, the media, or even just that the average person, his face has been on TV enough, is going to recognize him, and sell a photo to TMZ if he does, anything even remotely interesting. And so, you've got a guy that's essentially in his own little prison right now, and while awaiting trial. But like you said, it's not a fun situation. I don't think he's overplaying it. He needs to be away. I mean, the threats by the new Black Panther Party were just as reprehensible. You don't put a bounty on somebody's head and talk about whether you care whether they're alive or dead. It's just not the way we deal with things in this society. So, he does have some threats on him, and I think he should stay as under the radar as humanly possible.
Okay. And you mentioned that he'd be safer in jail. Of course, they will have to put him, I think, in segregation. And is it necessary he's going to be safer? Because even in that particular situation, you have inmates actually doing the bulk of the work of the prison, the jail itself.
True. And it's relative. It's definitely relative. You generally don't have firearms, and people have to make their own weapons. Granted, they can, kill somebody out of just brute violence at any point. But, in traditional society, if somebody finds out where he lives, they can do a drive-by in a heartbeat and he'd be done.
Yeah.
It's relative. I think there are threats to his safety because of the nature of what he did and the racial aspect that has been made of his case. There's whether he's inside or outside of prison, he's going to have and face constant threats to his livelihood.
Do you think the charge was appropriate?
I do. I don't think he's going to be necessarily convicted of it, but I think you have to charge with the greatest charge you can, with the understanding that the lesser included charges are automatically within it. I don't know that the killing of Trayvon necessarily reaches the standard of murder too, just because there was an altercation and there was, he brought a gun to a place he shouldn't have brought a gun. The gun was used. We don't know how and under what context the gun was used, and I don't think there's ever going to be any way that that's going to be decided to a reasonable, to the standard that it's got to be, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. Because there's plenty of reasonable doubt that's going to live and exist in this case. If Casey Anthony can get off on that standard, George Zimmerman surely can.
So you think they put that up there? Can you talk about what is the second degree murder for Florida?
The difference between murder one and murder two essentially is murder one, you have, and you don't have to have it, you don't have to be sitting at home planning, but you have an intended victim, and you're essentially intending to kill somebody. Murder two is something that's a little less than that, where the death happens out of essentially violent circumstances or with some malice aforethought is what it's called. And here you have a side of the story where that exists, where he essentially was hunting this kid with a gun. And you don't bring a gun to a situation where there could be confrontational violence without the possibility of using it, without the fact that it could very easily be used by one or both, either or parties. And so, there is a side of the story that fit, in the wailing. And that was, there were two things doing the blog, and I tried to tell both sides completely unbiased, tried to say, okay, let me pretend I'm the attorney for the Martin family, let me pretend I'm the attorney for, Zimmerman, and try to tell their side of the story. And what I concluded was, say what you will about Trayvon, because a lot was made of his, school conduct and stuff. It's fairly irrelevant. But say what you will about him, everything that they've said about what happened has proven to be true. Compare that to Zimmerman. Zimmerman said his nose was broken, or his people did. Well, there's no signs of that. He said his head was, bashed in. Well, there's one little cut that's bleeding, and in the initial video, you can see a little bit of swelling on the back of his head, but there's no massive blood, there's no massive trauma. And then you get into, both people claim that the wailing heard in the 911, the screaming heard in the 911 call was Trayvon's people said it was Trayvon, and Zimmerman said it was Zimmerman. And, experts have looked at it, listened to it, and said, okay, it's not Zimmerman. And, the more significant thing is that wailing in when the shot is fired. And if it were Zimmerman and he was being bashed in and, wailing, you would think he would still keep wailing for help after he killed Trayvon, if not more. Mm-hmm. The shock and awe of it just got more, not less intense. And so, putting those two facts together, kind of made me decide that, Zimmerman's got a long way ahead of a trial because I just don't believe the story.
Yeah. Last two questions regarding his attorneys that pulled out at the last minute. I mean, that didn't look really good for him, especially when they got on national media and say, I don't know what my client is. We haven't communicated in the last couple of days. I mean, can those things be used against him? But in the same sense, they did say, hey, we didn't in so many words, our client is talking to the state's attorney. So, and they recruited him, they dismissed himself off that particular case.
Right.
And that
2 issues there.
Say again?
2 issues there. Number one, they both should be brought up in front of the Florida bar. What their conversations were with George Zimmerman and the things they shared with the media is exactly why every attorney shouldn't be going to the media on cases. Mm-hmm. It breached attorney-client privilege, and it was entirely inappropriate and against Florida bar standards and unethical, and it offends me as an attorney. Part B is you saw the situation where people are going to flock to this case on both sides because of national attention. Everybody gets that claim for 15 minutes, and you saw it, and I think those two attorneys ultimately were claiming 15. And when it came right down to it, they weren't going to stick around for the 2 years to try the case. And you can always find your client. At any point, we have resources where we can, if the police can get a hold of them, we can get a hold of them. And, you don't sign up a client that you really are going to believe is a flight risk anyway. I got every one of my clients' cell phones, emails, everything else. And, even if they go, on vacation or something and I miss them for a few days, the last thing I'm going to do is go out to the media and say, well, I've got to withdraw. I can't find my client, and disparage my client in the media. It's unprofessional in any profession, but especially in ours where we have ethical standards. So, it's not going to be used against him, but
it don't make him look any better.
It doesn't make him look any better. But again, like you said earlier, some of that is just going to dissipate and be forgotten as time goes on.
And then, okay. Last question regarding, do you think he's going to take a plea?
No, I truly believe he thinks and believes that he was right and in the right place and doing the right thing for the right reason. And the state, especially the new appointed special prosecutor from here, who the prosecutor and mother, she is intense. She isn't going to lower the bargain enough that this guy could do 5 years and be done. She's not going to offer anything that I think he would take. So I think it's a matter of going to trial and seeing what, the jury finds he is guilty of beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, and they're just going to leave it at that. Well, again, I really appreciate it, John. You come on to the program and talk about the case. Again, your website is?
KnowTheLawyer.com, KNOWTHE lawyer, LAWYER.com.
Okay, and also
we're on Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff too.
Okay, and you also do a show as well? You have a call number for that?
Yeah, we've got a Sunday radio show called Courts and Sports, and it's me and NFL running back Rashad Jennings talk about, all the different aspects where courts and sports intersect, from the Saints bounty scandal to, the head injury, the concussion lawsuits and all that. And then we talk independently about what's going on in the NFL and what's going on in the world of courts. So it's a fairly, hopefully entertaining 1 hour show on Sundays.
Okay. And what call station is on or internet is on?
WOKV, which can be heard essentially on the East Coast from the south part of South Carolina down to the south part of Florida. But it's available, and past episodes are available on courtsandsportsradio.com.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate you coming to the program.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Take care. And this has been another production of the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet. You can download this episode on iTunes or on Blog Talk Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for listening, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet. For more information about equipment financing and asset-based loans, visit our website, applecapitalgroup.com. That's applecapitalgroup.com. Or call us at 866-611-7457. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. And remember, you can always get to the core via iTunes. You'll find all our previous episodes there. And thanks again for listening to the Core Business Show with Tim Jacquet.